Every year, nearly 1 million people climb to the top of a flat-topped rock in the Judean Desert. They stand at the edge and look down. 400 meters of vertical cliff, a straight drop into nothing, and then they notice something that does not belong. On the western slope, there is a scar, a massive, unnatural ramp of earth and stone, rising from the desert floor all the way to the fortress walls. It is 2,000 years old. In the spring of 73 AD, 960 Jewish rebels were trapped on top of this rock. Below them, 8,000 Roman soldiers of the 10th Legion, the most disciplined fighting force on the planet. The rebels had food, they had water, they had walls, and they had gravity on their side. Every path to the summit was a death trap. A handful of defenders could hold off an army for years. The Romans could not climb it. They could not starve it out. They could not go around it. So they did something that defies every rational calculation of cost and effort. They decided to build a mountain. To understand why the Romans had to build a ramp, you first have to understand what they were looking at. Masada is not a hill, it is a geological anomaly. A flat-topped mesa rising 400 meters, with nearly vertical cliffs on all sides. The plateau at the top large enough to hold palaces, storehouses, barracks, and enormous cisterns carved into the rock. King Herod had built this fortress as his personal bunker. He filled it with enough grain and dried food to last years. Enough water, collected through an ingenious system of channels, to survive in the middle of a desert. When the 10th Legion arrived and looked up at the fortress, they understood the problem immediately. The snake path was so narrow that 2 men could not walk side by side. Anyone climbing it under fire would be picked off, one by one. The Romans were camped in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. Daytime temperatures exceeded 40 degrees. The nearest water source was 10 miles away. Every drop had to be hauled across the desert by hand. And yet the Roman Empire did not retreat, because this siege was never about 960 people. It was a message. There is no place you can hide that Rome cannot reach. The Roman engineers found a weakness. On the western face, a natural spur of rock, the White Promontory, jutted out from the cliff at roughly the midpoint. It was not wide or tall enough on its own, but it was a foundation. The plan was simple in concept and monstrous in execution. Pile earth, stone, and timber on top of this ridge until the ramp reached the fortress walls. Then roll a siege tower up and smash through. First, the Romans built a wall, not around the fortress, but around the entire mountain. A circumvallation wall 4 kilometers long, punctuated by 8 fortified camps. No one gets in, no one gets out. Then the real work began. 500,000 tons. That is the estimated volume of material moved to build the siege ramp. Earth, crushed stone, boulders, timber from tamarisk trees hauled miles across the desert. Every basket carried by hand. The workforce was enormous. 8,000 soldiers supplemented by thousands of Jewish prisoners of war forced into labor. These prisoners carried the heaviest loads, knowing that every stone they placed brought the destruction of their own people one step closer. And the defenders could not stop it. The Romans had positioned the ramp on the western face, where the natural spur was outside the effective range of the defenders' weapons. Stones rolled from above lost momentum. Arrows at that distance were inaccurate. The ramp was just far enough to be untouchable and just close enough to be terrifying. The construction took between 2 and 3 months. The ramp rose approximately 75 meters above the natural spur. At its summit, the Romans built a stone platform to provide a stable base for the siege engines. Think about that number. 75 meters of vertical rise built entirely by human labor, in a desert, under combat conditions. The modern equivalent would be constructing a 25-story building out of dirt and rock, using nothing but baskets and bare hands. When the ramp was complete, the Romans hauled a siege tower to the top, 27 meters tall, clad in iron plates to resist fire. Inside, catapults and ballistae. At its base, a battering ram. The tower was rolled up on wooden tracks inch by inch until it stood level with the walls of Masada. The bombardment began. The ballistae in the tower swept the ramparts clean. Stone projectiles hammered the casemate wall at the summit. The defenders could no longer stand on the walls without being cut down. Then the ram swung. Again and again, the casemate wall began to crack. The outer layer buckled. Stones fell away. The Romans had breached the primary defense. But the defenders had built a second wall behind the first. Wooden beams packed with earth, a flexible barrier that absorbed the ram's blows instead of shattering. The Romans changed tactics. They launched fire. For a terrible moment, the wind shifted and blew the flames back toward the siege tower. The iron plating glowed red. Then the wind shifted again. The wooden wall burned from the inside. By nightfall, the breach was open. When the sun rose on April 16, 73 AD, the soldiers formed ranks. They climbed the ramp. They passed through the breach, shields raised, swords drawn, ready for the bloodiest combat of their careers. They found no one, no resistance, no surrender, no sound at all. The storehouses were burning, all except the food supplies deliberately left intact. The defenders wanted Rome to know they did not die of hunger. They chose this. 960 men, women and children. 2 women and 5 children, hidden in a water cistern, were the only survivors. The soldiers stood in silence. There was nothing to conquer. The Roman Empire spent months, moved 500,000 tons of earth, built a wall around a mountain, constructed a ramp that defied physics, hauled a tower up its face, and breached an impregnable fortress. And when they got inside, there was nothing left to win. The ramp is still there. After 2,000 years in the driest desert on Earth, it has barely eroded. The 8 camps are still visible from the air. The circumvallation wall still traces its circle in the dust. It stands as a monument to 2 things that cannot be reconciled: the absolute power of human engineering and the absolute limit of what power can achieve. The Romans built a mountain to reach 960 people, and when they arrived, the mountain was all that was left.